today. So thank you everyone for joining. I really appreciate the opportunity to share with you some background on what the disaster recovery program is and is not. I appreciate as either a small business owner or a leader with a not-for-profit organization that you have many things that you need to organize and get sorted in order to protect your livelihood and your organization. So our intent today is to share with you program details. Rick is an expert in his field. And if we're not able to answer your detailed question today, we'll take it offline. In addition, the Insurance Bureau of Canada wanted me to extend an invitation that if you have questions that are insurance related that we can't answer today, I'll get the contact number to our colleagues here at the end of the call, and so that those questions can be answered. So we'll do what we can. Again, Rick, I'll pass it over to you, but if Rick, if there's questions you would like me to take later on, just let me know.
Sure. Maybe I'll stop you for a sec. Brad, I apologize. I didn't actually officially introduce you. Maybe you wanted to tell everybody who you are in relation to Alberta Emergency Management Agency.
Sure. So right. My name is Brad Guess. I'm the Executive Director of Recovery. So our role is to support residents, small businesses, and a number of other institutions in their recovery. We also support funding to the municipality with regards to response costs, cleanup costs, accommodations, those sort of things. And our last role is to coordinate across government. So if there's an issue that's flood related and you need an answer out of Environment and Parks or Health or wherever, our role is to find that information and bring it back to the small business or the residents or the municipality to support the recovery. So think of it as a one window into government. And in addition to that, we also provide financial assistance. So again, my role is simple. I'm the executive director. I'm not in the trenches like Rick is, who provides face-to-face service to our very important applicants.
Perfect. Thanks, Brad. I was a little thrown off this morning in getting into this. We've had some technical difficulties. So usually I'd start with your introduction. Also, just for anyone on the line who I don't know, my name is Natasha Hartson, and I am the Director of Entrepreneurship and Innovation with Wood Buffalo Economic Development. And I'm here just more or less to facilitate and to help out with some of the Q&A, facilitating the question and answer. So just wanted to let everyone know that you are muted today. And if you have a question, please put it in the Q&A dialog box that you'll see along the bottom. That's the best way to connect in. The chat box gets a bit busy sometimes, so it's hard for us to follow the questions and answers. So if you have a direct question for Rick, if you can put it into the Q&A. And that is all from me. I will pass it off to Rick. And Rick, if you want to start off with an introduction, and then you can share your screen with your presentation if you'd like.
All right, thanks very much, Natasha. I'm just going to do a quick sound check just to make sure that it's still okay. It was okay earlier, but are you hearing me okay?
Yeah, you're good.
Awesome. Okay. All right, and thanks, Brad. Yeah, my name is Rick Melnychuk. I'm one of the managers with the Community Recovery Services of the Alberta Emergency Management Agency. I am a chartered professional accountant and switched careers from the accounting and tax field back in 2005. I sort of stumbled into working in disasters along with the province. So I've been doing this for about 12 or 14 years. Took a couple of breaks because it is pretty intense when you go through big programs. But yeah, my experience is in the area of small business. So I'm happy to be here today to share with you some information. The participants with regards to a high level look at disaster recovery programs as they go in Alberta, and specifically more on the small business side. So I'm gonna, this is the first time with Zoom, so I'm going to try to share my screen. I don't know. Just let me know if this is working.
Yeah, you're on the Zoom screen now, so.
Oh, okay.
You go back, you were on the PowerPoint and that worked.
Okay. All right. So I'm going to be looking, I've got two screens going, so I'm going to be looking to the side. I don't know if I can get it onto the, okay, are you seeing what, seeing
Yeah, I
something
am
on my?
seeing, I do see your note slides and whatnot, so yeah.
Okay, all right, sorry guys. Okay, so let's begin. So what is a disaster recovery program? Well, disaster recovery programs are conditional grant programs that are from the province of Alberta. We want to be clear that we're not an insurance program, it is a grant program. And what DRPs are intended to do is we will cover, the province is going to cover incremental uninsurable costs that are caused from extraordinary and widespread disasters. So certainly the event that RMWB has gone through has definitely been confirmed as extraordinary and it's pretty widespread. So we do have a program and that's what we're going to talk about today. So DRPs will assist with losses and damages for which insurance was not reasonably and readily available. We do consider ourselves, province does, as a funder of last resort. So you'll hear in any kind of key messaging, the first order of business for whoever has been affected is that you need to contact your insurance company. That is critical. One of the things that we often will discover in these programs is, and it's difficult from delivering, is that oftentimes citizens and small businesses will find that they're either inadequately insured or underinsured or not properly insured. And we hope that's not the case, but we do find it in just about every program. But that is the first thing, is that we need to organize is insurance, and how does that affect our citizens that are applying to the program. So what the program is intended to do is to provide compensation to return property to its pre-event basic functionality. So we're not a full replacement program, such as insurance, and that's why insurance is the better route, because there are situations where, and I know Brad used it in the town hall, if somebody had a granite countertop and they got flood damaged and we're going to reimburse them, we're going to give you some funds for a basic countertop, and that's on the residential side. We're not going to replace a granite countertop. So that's now, if the citizen wants to take the funds and buy a granite countertop and put in the rest, that's kind of up to them. But that's more on the residential side. We're going to focus on small business. And these programs are, when they're larger, they are jointly funded by the province and the federal government, and we certainly expect that this one will be the same, but we don't, that'll take years to finalize, but we do expect that this is going to be what we call a cost shareable program with the federal government. So now let's just talk a little bit about the application process. So as we've initially talked about insurance, the first thing we're going to say, key messaging right from the get-go, is work with your insurance firms to figure out how they can help. Sometimes it's just a straight, no, you have no coverage, you're denied, and that's the end of it. But there is situations where, and we're finding more and more that there is overland flood insurance becoming more and more available. We don't know, we're hearing that that's not the case in RMWB, but until we actually get the applications in and start dealing with the insurance side of things, we won't know this. But that's the first step. Then the citizen, if they're, if they're in a great situation where they're 100% covered by their insurance, great. We probably won't hear from them, but if that's not the case, then we're encouraging them to submit an application. And that's, at this particular time, there is an online opportunity for everybody to put in an application. From a small business perspective, we do have a PDF application that we're asking small businesses to download, fill out, and preferably email to us, but you can mail it. So once we get an application, we do use a case management model for our administration of applications. So applications will be assigned to a case manager at that point. The next step that the case manager will take is that there's two things that we look at primarily. Is first of all, are you eligible? Eligibility basically means, did the event for that applicant occur within the date that we expect it to and in the location? So those will come via the provincial order in council, and so that's the first thing we check, because we, oftentimes we'll get, it's a program for RMWB, and we'll get an application from somebody in Medicine Hat, surprisingly enough, that they somehow got some water in their business of their home. We just have to politely say we don't have a program. So that's the first thing on eligibility, and then we need to qualify the applicant, and we're going to get into that later in this presentation. So once those two are met, we're going to send out an evaluator to the site, and they're actually going to work with the applicant to determine what did they have that was damaged and how the program can reimburse them. So that's an on-site evaluation. After that, that is going to basically determine what can we pay. And it's not an unlimited, and like I said earlier, it's not an insurance program. So what we'll do is we have what's called a disaster assistant guidelines. We refer to it as the DAG, and it has rate schedules and such that we will work with. Now with small businesses, it's a little more challenging because small businesses have oftentimes very unique items. So that's where the case manager will work with the evaluator and with the applicant to determine what's eligible. Once we get to the next step is we'll either do, if we have everything in hand, we can do a final payment and send it out. But oftentimes with small businesses and not-for-profits is that it's a bit of a longer process, is that they don't have all the repairs done, or they don't have information on their costs. So we'll issue an initial payment, and we could do a number of payments. And then ultimately we'll get to a final payment, and then after that, the application is closed. So just want to talk a little bit about what's not eligible. And so the program's not going to pay if there's any loss that could have been reasonably prevented. That's a challenging one, but we do have to put it out there. If there was insurance that was reasonably and readily available, that should have been in place. The most common one is sewer backup. If we determine, or if it's determined that the applicant experienced 100% sewer backup, that's an insurable peril. It should have gone through insurance, and there's not much in the way that the program would be able to help with that. If it's a combination that gets a little more complicated, then that's where we'll work with the applicant and the insurance firm or broker to determine what did insurance cover and what can the program possibly cover. The next thing is, oftentimes in these events, there's litigation that goes on. And so if there is some sort of litigation that goes on between our applicant and, say, for instance, their insurance firm, and they receive some funding from the litigation, and if it covers certain things, then we're not going to duplicate those payments. So again, that's a little more complicated, and I won't get into too much detail. One of the things that's really challenging, especially from a small business perspective during these events, is that they're often looking for compensation for loss of income or revenue. This is not DRP eligible. That is an insurable item, and we just do not cover that. There should have been an insurance policy for that. So the group of applicants that we're going to look at today specifically are what we refer to as non-residential. So residential would be homeowners and residential tenants. What we're going to look at is small businesses, landlords, farmers, not-for-profit organizations, institutions such as universities, condominium associations, and water. We're not going to do too much on water co-ops, but they are part of our non-residential applicants. So from these applicants, what are we going to ask for? Well, first of all, we're going to need an application form. We're definitely going to need some information regarding your insurance. And insurance is usually specific to buildings, equipment, and inventory that was lost. The other aspect, or one of the other things we're going to look for, is some tax and financial or other documentation, and we're going to get into some discussion on that a little bit later in this presentation. So if we get to the point of where we've got everything we need and the applicant we determine is eligible and qualifies, we're going to want to confirm what were they responsible to pay, and this can get challenging for small businesses that are a commercial tenant. So we're going to probably need documentation regarding their rent or lease agreement. And this often will get challenging with agricultural applicants, because they will often rent land that gets flooded, and so now we need to work with them to determine what we can pay, what the owner is responsible, and such those things. We're going to want a list of their damaged items, and if they've repaired any, we're hoping to get before and after pictures. We really encourage that, and the word is getting out more often than not. We do get pictures, so that's good, because we don't expect the applicants to wait for us. We expect them to get on with the concerns at hand, get their damages repaired, get their business back operating. So if we get there in a couple of months, hopefully stuff is already in the way of being repaired. So if you have pictures, that's ideal for us. We're going to want a GST number if it's applicable. And this one, I know RMDWB has been talking about this. We do require, especially on the small business side, if there's any specific permits or approvals that are required, we're going to ask for those. And the most common one that we find is with agriculture. Oftentimes they'll have dams, water dams or dugouts, and there is permits and approvals that are required for those. So we would need those. And then the last aspect that we're going to look at is the funds that are distributed from disaster recovery programs to small business and not-for-profits. We need that money to be spent on repairing. So we're going to, if we get information about what was damaged, we're going to require proof that was repaired. It could be in the way of paid invoices, could be the way of sending us pictures that you fix things up, something to determine that the money got spent where it was supposed to be spent. Okay, so I just want to talk a little bit more of insurance, because it is a very big factor in what we do. So as I indicated, it's for building equipment inventory generally. I say only, but usually generally. And so when there is information regarding an insurance, number one, it could be just a straight denial. But if it's not a denial, if there was some insurance coverage, we're going to want to get some specifics. And so that's where this goes into. If there was a cap, and generally we're talking about overland flood insurance on this side of things. Sewer backup as a whole, like I said, generally that's 100% insurable. So if we do get a overland flood situation where they have that kind of policy, then we're going to want some more information on that. We're going to know what the insurance excluded, and what I want to be really clear is that disaster recovery programs do not reimburse or cover any form of insurance. Sorry, insurance deductibles. My apologies. I'm at home and my dog is scratching at the door. Hang on.
No worries. I have a 3-year-old running around in the basement, so I've muted myself because I think everybody can hear her.
Okay, so getting a little bit more into the specifics about how a business, and in this particular case for small business and landlords, what is our disaster recovery program qualification criteria? So this is what we are going to be working with our small business and landlord applicants to confirm that they meet our guidelines in terms of what is a small business and landlord from a disaster recovery program perspective. So the first order of business is for a small business to qualify, their revenues have to be between 6,000 and 15 million annually. So what we're going to ask for is we're going to ask for some tax documents to confirm that, and that's generally from the previous completed year or fiscal year. The business should not employ more than the equivalent of 20 full-time employees. The owner is the day-to-day manager. It's not a hobby business. That's a bit of a challenging one, but we do look to the CRA guidelines as to what they determine as a hobby business. And then the last aspect is that if they tell us right out that they're not going to reestablish, that's going to be a problem. We need businesses to reestablish, and that's the intent of this program, is that they're going to, after they're going to use the funds to reestablish in the community.
Rick, can I ask you, that was a question I had around reestablish. Does it have to be in the community, or like, sorry, in the same location, or can they reestablish in another part of the community?
What I would suggest is they work with the case manager to determine that. If there is an argument that they can reestablish, we certainly don't want them leaving the community, right? But if they have an opportunity to move to a better location, then we'll work with them.
Okay.
There's no, I can't say yes or no for sure, but we want to be as flexible as possible to help them reestablish in the community if that means they have a better location. We wouldn't compensate them for anything that would be warranted to move, but you know, my recommendation is that the small business, that they bring that up with their case manager early. Okay. So, and then we'll try to work with them.
Thank you.
From an agricultural perspective, it's very similar. Gross revenues between 6,000 and 15 million, but we don't consider the employee side of things. They don't have to be less than the equivalent of 20 full-time employees. This was taken out for Hutterite colonies that were affected by disaster events, because oftentimes they will have more than 20. So the province relaxed the rules on that, but the rest is the same. More than 6,000, less than 15 million, be an owner, operator, day-to-day manager, not be a hobby business, and they should reestablish. They must reestablish, I should say. From a not-for-profit perspective, they also have some qualification criteria that our program requires. So they must be legally registered. They must contribute to the fabric and sustainability of the community or provide a basic essential service. So that's, you know, that's more often than not, we'll get things, applicants like Boys and Girls Clubs and homeless shelters and those type of things. That's exactly what we want. That's exactly what the province wants to help. They're not for profit, and they're adding to the fabric of the community. The big thing that we want to ensure is that the facility is allowed to all members of the community, whether they use it or not. It must be allowed to be accessed by all members, and they also must reestablish. For condo associations, what we ask of them to qualify is that they provide us a list of the unit holders and whether the unit holder is a homeowner or a landlord. So our primary qualification criteria is if the majority of unit holders are homeowners, then they qualify. If the majority of unit holders are not homeowners, maybe they're landlords or secondary homes, we don't run into this very often, but then the condo association would have to meet the small business criteria, and that gets, I put here, complicated and painful, because I've been through only one of those in my career, and it was exactly that. It was complicated and painful. So, but we'll deal with that if it's a situation. It's not to say that they couldn't qualify. It's just more complicated. So, I've only encountered one where number one didn't apply. Most of the time, it's just homeowners. So as long as the majority of the unit holders are homeowners, the condo association will qualify. And then just to add, and I didn't note it here in the presentation, so in a condo unit, each homeowner, if they are affected by the flood event, they will have to put in an application. They will be considered a homeowner or a residential applicant. And then the condo association will also have to apply for the common areas. And oftentimes what we'll find is with condo associations within the unit, like they'll be responsible for the common areas outside the units, but within the units, they may be responsible from paint in. So maybe drywall and insulation, vapor barrier as such. So, but we'll work with the condo association once we get to that particular point. So timelines, this is something that I was asked to add. This is something that we strive for, but in bigger events, these are challenging, I got to admit. So once the application is received from a small business or not-for-profit or condo association, we really stress to the case managers that we want them to try to make contact with the applicant within 2 weeks of receipt. That's, for getting 1,000 to 2,000 applications, that's challenging, but that's our goal. That's our goal. That's what we stress to our case managers. Once we have had interaction with the applicants and we've confirmed they are eligible and they meet our qualification criteria, we're going to send out an evaluator to do a site evaluation. And from the time that we make the request, the evaluation team, their timelines is 30 days. Now there can be challenges again with that, with lots of applicants, and sometimes it's hard to get a hold of the applicant because they're busy too. So, but we do try to get that done in a 30-day period. Once we get the application or the evaluation back, our goal is to have payment out within 60 days. So that's our goal. I put at the bottom, it's much more challenging in larger programs, but that's what we're planning and striving for, and hopefully we can succeed in that. That's what I had. High level.
Great.
I hope I provided some good information, and now we'll open it up to questions.
Perfect. Thanks so much, Rick. We've definitely got a few in here, so I'm just going to go right up to the top here. So the first question is, we're a landlord in Fort McMurray area. We had refrigerators in our units damaged. Our insurance has a deductible of $250,000, so it makes sense. So it makes sense in putting a claim. Will we be able to get financial aid for the replacement of the refrigerators that are approximately $20,000? Okay, so that's, yeah, I'm assuming that they don't want to pay the deductible of $250,000 because the expenses themselves are less at $20,000.
We'll have to look at this one. I encourage that applicant to, or that citizen, that landlord, to submit an application. We're going to have to really do some diligent work with the insurance side of things to determine if we can help out. There's so many different scenarios and situations. If it's 100% sewer backup and you chose a very high deductible, that may have been a good decision to keep your premiums down, but that doesn't mean that you're going to qualify and be eligible for disaster recovery program assistance. But I encourage those landlords to make an application, and we'll work with them to see if we can help them. Our goal is to try to help, but we do have a set of guidelines and rules, and sometimes we just can't. But I encourage them to make an application, and let's see how we can help out.
Next question, which I think you did address, but just to emphasize it again, if you chose not to have insurance, we do know that we're in a current environment where people were looking at ways to cut costs and things like that. If you chose not to have any insurance, what would happen?
Well, again, I encourage who's asking the question to submit an application, and we'll work with them. If that was a business decision to not take out insurance, and insurance is considered reasonably and readily available, they may not be eligible for DRP assistance. But if that's the case, then we're going to try to help them out in other ways. We're going to maybe look at if there's any non-government organizations that can maybe assist. So if you're in that situation, again, I encourage you to submit an application. Let's see if we can provide disaster recovery program funding. If we can't for some reason, then we'll try to determine if there's other means to help out. We want to try to help where we can.
Okay, thanks. Will you be able to share with me the copy of these slides? We would be able to make them available to people.
That's a good question. I don't see why not, but I got to check with my higher ups, unless Brad can maybe weigh in if it's okay to share
Yeah, we'd be pleased to share. It's important that we get the information out, and we'll make that available right after this in a PDF format.
Perfect, thank you.
Thanks,
Yeah,
Brad.
so
Yeah, it's all information that comes from our disaster assistance guidelines. So thank you, Brad. Appreciate that.
Perfect, thanks, Brad. Yeah, we have a new portal that we did in partnership with a number of stakeholders, wbcentral.biz, and so we'll place it on there along with this session itself is recorded, so we'll include that too. Next question is very similar to the last. I think it's similar to the very first one, which is around this concept that your deductible is higher than the cost. So the deductible is $25,000, but the loss is less than that. Would they be considered for funding? So not to ask you to repeat, but I feel maybe sounds like they should still apply, but.
Yeah, I encourage you to apply, definitely. And we'll work with you and see if there's a way that we can help out some way or another. We'll see. It all depends on the type of water damage. So we'll, like I said, encourage them to submit an application, and we'll do our best to try to see if we can help you out.
Thank you. So currently there's some ongoing investigations as to whether or not damage was caused by overland water or sewer backup. As you were saying, there's a overlap there. While this is being investigated, will this cause a delay in proceeding with DRP claim response?
No. Well, all of those aspects don't come into play here. We'll look at the each application and their scenario. What was the situation? If there's something going on with the public side of things as to why there was overland or something or sewer backup, that won't slow us down. The one thing that will slow us down is if there is legal action, if the applicant is for whatever reason is bringing some sort of a suit against some party, then that could slow things down. But if there's some sort of an investigation, that will not stop our process.
Okay, perfect. Next up, we have two questions from someone. She says they aren't small business related, but we'll see if you can answer anyway. Are the approval and application processes similar for residents? Can residents download the PDF and email it?
At this particular point, our residential and residential tenants, we have an online portal. So no, at this particular point, we're really encouraging people to try to use the online portal if you're a homeowner or a residential tenant. It does require a My Alberta digital ID, but we are working if we know that there's situations where maybe that's not viable for some folks. So we are looking at ways to accept application in different forms, and we're working on that and doing some planning as we speak.
Mm-hmm. I imagine in circumstances with libraries closed and other places where people can access computers, it could be a bit of a challenge right now for people.
Yeah, that's exactly the
mm-hmm.
scenario. And even in some locations, we're finding that technology is really challenging. Just to get good internet is difficult. So I don't. That's not an RMWB, but I don't believe. But yes, we're working on something for sure.
Okay. That kind of leads into the next part of that question, which is, will there be an in-person or telephone support available for people who are having difficulty submitting the paperwork?
We've got plans in the works for that as well too, to have support for citizens and small businesses right in the community to be able to assist with those things and others. And Fort McMurray has really been through some challenging times over the last 5 years, so the province recognizes that, and we are working to have ground support to assist, not just the funds, right? Not just that we're a bank to help out. Yes, we are, but we want to be more than that to be able to help the citizens of Fort McMurray recover from this event.
Rick, it's Brad here. We also have a call center that people can call in, correct?
That is correct.
We'll provide that number afterwards for everyone that's on the call. And when you phone into that number, they can walk you through the online portal.
Okay, thanks, Brad. Okay, so this one says I have a unique case. So I based on your responses thus far, I have a feeling your answer may be to they're going to have to apply, but can't operate. So they can't operate due to the boil water advisory restrictions. Also lost the food products worth $2,500. Am I eligible for support from the DRP? Insurance denied already due to higher deductible for food and won't cover for advisory. So I'm assuming that's not water damage, it's food spoilage as a result.
Right. Yeah, we would work with applicants to try to assist them if they've been evacuated and not able to access their business and they've had spoilage, loss of inventory. If we determine that they've qualified for our program, that's something that we could definitely assist with. Yep, you're right. I'm going to say it again. I encourage you to apply.
This one was a deductible question again. So if my deductible is $25,000, my loss is $27,000, should I be putting in an insurance claim or just apply for the funding?
You have to put in an insurance claim. We definitely are going to require that because we need to see what happened. Now we do. This gets a little bit. I don't want to get into too much detail, but if you have a policy in place that's for overland flood insurance and you make a claim, we have a policy or we have a rule that says we don't want anybody, if you have overland flood insurance, if you're worse off by taking the insurance than if you would have just gotten funds from the DRP. So again, we would work with the applicant and the insurance provider to determine how we can determine what we can pay so that the citizen or the small business is not worse off by having that overland flood insurance. So again, that gets a little bit complicated, but put an application and we'll figure it out.
Mm-hmm. I've been hearing a lot of people have pretty high deductibles, so I think that maybe it's something you're going to see a lot of, is that deductible question. Next one is, if a claim is submitted to DRP and accepted, will that remove any ability of the affected business to sue another party? Should it be found in the future that there is other party liability?
Well, we certainly, that's a big part of our rules, is that if there is litigation, that could definitely affect the application. If it's determined that an applicant has been paid disaster recovery program funding and then receives a settlement of some sort, the province would be looking to determine if there was any overlap. So if it looks like there was duplication of payments between the settlement funding and the DRP funding, then the province could go after that applicant to try to get some of the funds back. They would be considered in an overpayment situation. It's not common. I have seen it in the past, and that would be a situation. But it's, again, we'd have to do some work on that to determine if there was an overlap and if indeed there was an overpayment.
Thanks. It looks like that may be all the questions I'm seeing through the dialogue box. I encourage anyone, if you want to ask a question, to use the Q&A box at the bottom, and you could type yours in. I'm just looking to see, we had a few in advance of the session, and I'm just seeing, I feel that we've answered it. It's a very common question. It seems to be the deductible versus the loss of income. So that was another question that came in again. And then another question is related to, is there support for a residential landlord? So yeah, it's a residential piece, but yeah.
Yeah, no, for sure. We've had situations where the basement was developed into a landlord, like a rental suite, and the homeowner was upstairs. And we can pay for those, right? Like we work with them if they meet our qualification criteria as a landlord. That's definitely something that we've paid for in the past. And then just standard, you know, suites or homes that are rental properties. We'll go through the qualification process and determine if we can help out. If they meet our qualification process or qualification criteria, then they would be eligible for assistance.
And that one falls, correct me, that one falls within the small business / landlord, correct?
Correct, yeah. And always the caveat, we have to confirm the insurance, right? Insurance is a huge aspect of this.
Okay. Another question did come in. Is there a deadline for application for submission? Our insurance companies are quite slow at responding to questions, so it may be a month or more until we can determine with certainty what we are covered for.
So the deadline is August 5th to get an application. Don't wait to hear back from your insurance. Submit your applications, and if it turns out you're fully covered by insurance, we'll just close the claim. But don't miss the deadline. Don't miss the deadline. It's August 5th.
August 5th, good to know. Next question. We have a building downtown that was damaged by flood. It has been vacant for more than 30 days, so the insurance company is saying it's not covered. That may be a Insurance Bureau of Canada question, but I don't know if you have any knowledge on that, Rick.
Yeah, that's a bit of a challenging one. Submit the application. I might look at that one personally.
All right.
See if there's a way we can help out.
Okay, thanks, Rick. Okay, so does DRP cover business interruption due to flood as stage 1 relaunch has now taken place?
Yeah, no, that's something I did mention in the, if he's talking about business interruption, like loss of revenue or income, that is not an eligible item for disaster recovery programs. There is insurance available for that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that'll be an interesting question to learn how that's going to work on the insurance side. Outside of your scope, I know, Rick, but I'm curious to see how that will now take place due to the pandemic. Many insurance weren't covering it. That is it for the questions. I'm just seeing, yeah, the pre-questions, that was all I had as well. I think one of the key questions we talked about with some other groups in advance of this session was just to understand, and you kind of went through it, but maybe just one more time, if you could reiterate the key difference between a nonprofit versus a small business in terms of eligibility. Because I heard they're pretty similar, but is it mostly just that they have to be a registered nonprofit? That's the key difference?
Yeah, well, yeah, the one primary key difference from a not-for-profit is we're not concerned with any kind of income or revenue streams. We're small business and landlords. We do look at what their annual gross revenue is. Not-for-profits, it's, yes, you must be legally registered as a not-for-profit, and must be legally registered. You must add to the fabric of the community. The facility that was damaged must have unrestricted public access, and you must reestablish. Those are your primary not-for-profit criteria that we look at.
Okay. Yeah, I think you'll see a number of hybrids of that, I think. We have a lot of business organizations that would be set up as a business, but add to the social fabric, such as our gymnastics club, a few dance studios, things like that weren't actually nonprofit, but they'll be able to apply, I guess, under the small business piece.
Correct.
Another question is coming in. Is there anything being done to educate businesses and residents on the dangers of asbestos? This is an inherent risk as some people without insurance engage in cheaper, non-professional services for restoration.
That is definitely out of
your scope, yeah.
My scope as an accountant and DRP administrator. But I think just in general knowledge, as we know, asbestos is very dangerous. So I guess I would encourage to to contact the local municipality, they may be able to provide some assistance. We have been hearing that there's potentially a fair bit of possibly asbestos abatement that's going on. So something that I'll bring up, and we'll look into see if there's some information or key messaging that we can get out.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we've been hearing that question a little bit as well. So we've brought it, we continue to have discussions about better education around that as well. That was it for questions. Brad asked if he could, Brad, if you wanted to jump in now, feel free.
Yeah, so I'll just, if you don't mind, I'll add on to Rick's answer regarding asbestos. So the understanding I have when speaking with the CAO is, and it goes back to the main point that Rick also shared, is that it's really important that you work with the RMWB to get the right permits. Asbestos needs to be mitigated and handled with care. And given that that's a local bylaw requirement, asbestos abatement, if is eligible under the program, if the asbestos was disturbed because of flooding. So just wanted to reiterate that, again, please talk with RMWB. They'll give you direction on what permits are required, and they can get you in contact with any safety code officers that can guide you. If you're doing abatement, make sure you get quotes because it's not cheap. The rule of thumb is if you're doing something that, and you're wondering if the program will pay for it, if it's over $2,000, get at least 2 quotes. So if it's 2,000, 2 quotes, that's a good rule of thumb. And then just finally, our federal colleagues in Western Economic Diversification just announced last week a special program that directly is relevant for businesses in RMWB that have been either impacted by flood or COVID. I appreciate that while you're waiting for insurance settlements and while you're waiting for program payment from BRP, you may have some cash liquidity challenges. And so Western Economic Diversification would have some programs available for you to help with that cash liquidity. So like I said, we'll provide that.
Oh, Brad, you've cut out there.
What was last thing?
Well, you seem to have lost your sound entirely.
Okay, I guess what I'm saying is Western Economic.
Unfortunately, we can't hear you, Brad. I know you were saying regarding Western Economic Diversification funding. That's it. We can send some information out about that following the call as well, so people are aware of it. I think you're speaking about the additional $40,000 loan and portion of it is forgivable. You can get through Community Futures for those that didn't. It could be wrong. Okay, thanks. Yeah, so we'll send some more information out about that. At this point, it looks like there's no further questions. So I want to thank you both, Brad and Rick, for your time today. I really appreciate this. It's very helpful for the business community, and we likely, I'm sure, will be in connection again. And this session was recorded, so we will put it on our on the new WB Central website that was a partnership with our stakeholder groups. And we'll share it there, and I'll share the link with you guys here at the end of the call. Other than that, if Rick or Brad, if you have anything further you wanted to jump in, I know Brad, we're struggling to hear you, but Rick, was there any last things you wanted to mention?
I just wanted to encourage again to submit applications. We'll do what we can to help out. Applications are on the Alberta Emergency Management website. I don't know if you have that link, Natasha. But if you go to the website and kind of poke around there, you should find a link to the PDF form, and then there will be instructions about how to email it The call center number is on there. I used to know it off heart, but I don't, I'm sorry. But we can get that information as well too, to make sure that if there's a place that if somebody wants to call in, that they can. So
perfect. Yeah, feel free to email me at info@choosewoodbuffalo.com if you want, or .ca, sorry. Whew, I don't know our email either. I'm used to saying my own. Okay, well, on that note, I'll put up the website so people know from the wbcentral.biz website is where we have a number of resources for both COVID and flood that are locally specific, which definitely would link you into this program as well. Following the call, we'll share the PowerPoints with everyone and the links that we've been talking about and phone numbers so that you can connect on that. I will leave it at that. I'm going to share my screen with this. That'll kick Rick out. So this gives you the website that I was speaking of regarding woodbuffalocentral.biz. It's a really great new resource for businesses, so please check it out. You can search at the top flood DRP, and you're going to find links to everything that you need there. So thank you everyone for your time, and have a good rest of your day.
Thank you, everyone.
So feel free to hang up if you'd like, Rick. I'll hang out for a few minutes, giving people the option to see this site and whatnot. But thank you for your time, Rick. I really appreciate it.
All right, thank you.